Hi, come on in.
And join in. It's the Very Merry Life. Hi, I'm Mary Hendricks, and you might know me as that relatable AF Mama over on Instagram who hopefully feels like an old friend at this point. And if not, it won't be long till it feels that way as we get raw, unfiltered, and very unapologetic in all things motherhood, marriage, sex, and more. From moments worth savoring to moments worth surviving, get ready to leave feeling seen and supported. You have a friend here now, so hey, take a seat. What's going on? Well, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to have you here. I think this is going to be a really great conversation today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, so real quick before we get into it, I'll have you introduce yourself. I like to have my guests do that for them, and then we'll get chit-chatting.
Yeah, so I'm Justine Carino. I'm a psychotherapist with a private practice in New York, and I specialize in treating anxiety disorders. So generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, you name it. But I also treat depression, and I also do family therapy and couples therapy and grief support. I also host the podcast Thoughts from the Couch, which I started during the pandemic when I was very pregnant with my second child. And I had like a little bit more time to squeeze in a podcast that I always wanted to do. And we focus on conversations around mental health and wellness. And I have an online course for ambitious working moms to teach them how to manage stress and anxiety a little bit better.
Love that. I think what I was just saying is Justine and I were kind of talking right before I hit record about the term working mom. And it's always hard. And I know you had said it was like, it's a hard term to go around because we're all working.
Yes.
Regardless. It's just some of us are working out of the home, sometimes not, working out of the home to bring in a paycheck to help support their family, while others of us stay home to still add to that paycheck. I always like to remind people of that. Like, you are still just as responsible for that paycheck coming in. It's a weird dynamic because I know that's been like a big debate on social media that I've been seeing is like the stay-at-home mom versus the working mom.
Yes.
And, people argue, they're like, we're all working. And I'm like, well, I get that. I think when I think of working mom, I think of someone that works in an office.
Correct.
And then also as a mom. That's the way I think of it when someone says that to me.
I agree with you. I felt insecure, as I was saying, like using that term in part of my conversations in the online space, or even like describing my podcast or my course, because as you're saying, like being home is work, right? I think it's personally so much more difficult for me to be home all day or a week with my kids than it is to go to work and do psychotherapy, right? There's a huge difference. And like research even shows like staying home with your children all day is more stressful than going to an office, right? Comparatively to most jobs, right? We have police officers, we have firemen, we have people in the military. That's a different type of job. But for the most part, when you're home, you have interrupted moments your whole day. Like the minute you're focusing on something, a kid's screaming for you, your attention's elsewhere, there's poop everywhere. Like who knows what's going on? You can't focus solely on what your priority is if it relates to doing something for yourself. Which for me in my office, I have like focused attention for 6-7 hours, no one interrupting me. It's a whole different ball game. So the working mom, stay at home mom, I hate the terminology, but it's hard to describe it in other ways.
Yeah, until there's like something new that comes out. So for the sake of this podcast, just know when we say stay-at-home mom, it's just a mom or parent. Yeah, stay-at-home parent is home. When we say working parent, working mom, it's just a mom that also has a paycheck earning job. Like it's someone that's working in some capacity for a company or something that's also financially contributing to the family tangibly. I like to say that tangible, like tangible. That is like the big, tangible. Because stay-at-home moms, they do. And that's something I always like encourage some of my stay-at-home mom followers. I'm like, you are just as responsible for bringing that paycheck in. And I think sometimes we fall victim to not believing that. Yeah. And we think that, we're not, but assuming that you and your partner created this life together, this idea of what you want your family to look like, your husband or spouse or whoever's bringing in the paycheck would not be able to have the family you do and the circumstances you do if you were not home. Correct. If that's what you guys agree on. So you are just as responsible for making that happen. And I mean, if you think about it, if they had hired a nanny, that would be considered a job.
Right. It's such a good point. Such a good point.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, I love to get into this conversation, helping working moms and kind of going through. And I know you have a 3-step, I think it's a 3-step methods or 3 ways for working moms to manage stress. And I would love to hear about that. And then just love to talk about, I'm sure we can talk about anxiety even. We can get into that.
For sure. Yeah. So, I have 2 parts of my career, right? Part 1 is the private practice where I'm treating someone that's already hit the crisis, right? They're already struggling with an anxiety disorder or depression or couple conflict. Like there's already something happening. This other branch of my job is more of like prevention. Like, let me try and prevent someone from getting to that crisis. So when we're having this conversation, I'm talking about how can women develop some new skills to prevent a crisis of severe anxiety, depression, relationship issues, if that makes sense. So I have some ways, I have a million ways working moms can manage stress and perfectionism, or, people pleasing, the overachieving. A lot of these moms feel like pressure to be perfect in every part of their life, whether it's at home and at work, and trying to balance that is so stressful. But I am going to break it down to 3 steps that I find myself talking about over and over with a lot of the women I work with in my practice, but also in my coaching and in my online course.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So the first step is to get very familiar with your shoulds, oughts, and musts. So these are like little tiny words that make such a difference on how we feel about ourselves and others, right? And so we have running conversations in our heads all day long. We don't even know about it. Some of them we can pay attention to, and other parts of these conversations are really subconscious, and sometimes they come in like daydreams or fantasies, but there's a running conversation all day. Studies show that there's like over 6,000 thoughts per day that we're having. And I find that a lot of women, especially perfectionistic women, high achieving women, they're often saying things like, I should, I ought to, I must. And these shoulds, ought tos, musts, we call them cognitive distortions in therapy, but we don't need to use that fancy word. But these are common ways of thinking that lead to feelings of anxiety and stress throughout our life. So for example, I should make everyone happy all the time. I shouldn't ever make anyone mad. A good mom should, a good mom ought to, a good wife should do this. I must look this way or weigh this much, right? After this baby, I must fit into the pre-baby jeans, right? So we have these conversations all day long, and often these rules, because they're kind of like rules we make up for ourselves, they're unrealistic, they're really judgmental and downright unnecessary. And they're also reflective of like black or white thinking, like this all or nothing thinking, like it must be this way or nothing. And then you feel like you're failing if you can't live up to these really unrealistic expectations of yourself.
We'll be back after a quick break. Eye-Opening Moments podcasts are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
Yeah. Well, I think all of us can probably relate to that in some way. I think that's one of the big things that I hear a lot just on MySpace and like the community I've built is one, like even yesterday on my stories, I have a formal event with my husband and next Thursday. It's the first event that I'm 14 months postpartum. 14 months postpartum. And it's the first time that my husband and I are actually getting a night out.
Wow.
And like in this time. So it's a big event, but it's totally out of my comfort zone. And, I feel pretty good, but I did dress try on, and you see yourself in a new light because I wear clothes daily and I feel good and that stuff. But when you see yourself in something you don't ordinarily wear, you're like kind of a little taken back. Mm-hmm. And you do get caught up in like, I should look a certain way, or it's almost like I know for me, I know I'm going to be with my husband and I want to like impress people and make it seem like, I know I always get caught up in wanting people to look at me and be like, oh, she's managing well. She has 3 kids. She's managing well. And there's like this pressure I put on myself to make it look like everything is sorted out.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, I feel like when we follow these rules that we create about how we should look, how we should be, that actually takes away a lot of our own control, because a lot of these shoulds and musts are reflective of external reward or like motivation. Like, I want to impress other people. I want to avoid judgment from other people. And we kind of lose control and ownership of like what aligns with us and our values, right? You might feel really good about the way you look before this event, and then you put on these clothes and you're like, oh God, but it part of that, oh God feeling is about, am I not living up to an expectation? And sometimes those expectations are defined for us about how we should be looking at a certain point, and we lose like from the inside how we really feel. So I try and tell clients like really pay attention to those shoulds, musts, oughts, and then change the language. Like, instead of I must, say I'm choosing to, right? Or I want to, or I don't want to. Just change the language slightly and you get more control over how you feel about yourself.
Yeah, well, and I completely agree on that. I actually said that on my stories yesterday. It's hard when, like, in a moment like that of trying on dresses. And the old Mary, I've dealt with the eating disorder in the past and things like that. So like old Mary probably would have completely blasted myself down years ago for like a try on like that and just punished the shit out of myself. And this current Mary right now, and thankfully to motherhood, I think motherhood just completely reframed my brain, because I have 2 little girls and I have a little son, and I just have kids that look up to me. But now it's a choice where I recognize a choice of being like, okay, no, I'm going to choose to move on from this. And I shared it openly on my stories. I didn't want to like do this try on my stories and be like, oh, I feel great and everything, because I did it. And I was like, I don't want to skirt past that either, because it's a choice every single day to wake up and speak kind to myself in a manner like that. It's a choice every single day to be like, no, we're not going to let this happen today. We're going to just move past this, and we're going to feel good.
I love that. And I think there's so many choices we can make throughout our day that are intentional, habitual, right? So sometimes we have habitual choices that we're like, why am I even doing this or saying this to myself? I'm just so used to doing this and saying this to myself. Let me choose to like think about this differently or react to this situation differently. So I even like, listen, I'm a therapist, but I have to do this work on myself. And I often have to notice like, why am I in this mood right now? Like, why am I perpetuating this mood for the rest of the day? It's clearly impacting everybody around me. I can choose to react to whatever circumstance put me in this mood a little bit differently and see what happens. And it always works. Like, you have control over how you choose to react to things.
Yeah, completely agree. I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great reminder.
Yes, it's difficult, but it's useful.
It is. Yeah, it is. It takes practice. What I found is like, there was a moment last year when I was like freshly postpartum, and I did a swimsuit try on for like a collaboration. And that's like, I was like 4 months postpartum. So getting on swimsuits is,
You're brave.
And but what's funny, and I actually did it when I did this, it was over a year ago when I did this, I shared about it. I actually got like emotional, because for the first time of like me looking in the mirror and taking this video and doing all this stuff, and again, that was completely out of my comfort zone. I actually, like, my first thought was, you look beautiful. And that was like a huge thing for me, because it took time. And I remember I had people ask me, and they're like, how? And I was like, because it takes practice. It's a habit. So if you get in the habit of constantly railing yourself and just putting yourself down, it's going to be easy. Your brain is going to default to just the negative. But I said, it's going to take hard work and practice to just keep it going.
Totally.
So it
totally.
becomes habit.
It's like, so we can rewire our brain, right? We're able to react to things and think about things differently, but they say it's as hard as learning a second language. So you can learn a second language if you work hard at it and practice that second language, but it's difficult. So reframing and thinking differently about how we talk to ourselves takes dedication, commitment, and practice.
Yeah, totally agree. So if you're listening right now, start today. I always challenge people that I'm like, find something about yourself that is like, that you appreciate. And or the way you view yourself in your role of what you do, like, especially like if you don't find value in yourself, like in some way. And I hear this a lot with, moms that are working from home, stay-at-home mom style. Like if you are not tangibly, like, rethink the way that you are seeing yourself and see the value in that, because that's just, I think that's one thing that we kind of lower our bar for ourselves in situations, especially motherhood. I feel like motherhood, we completely blast the crap. I don't know where that comes from, but we just nitpick ourselves apart.
Oh my God. Yeah, we do. And it's so like, I have my own therapist. I'm a therapist, but I love going to my therapist and talking about motherhood issues because it's hard, right? And I had a conversation with her like a few sessions ago where I was like, I just feel so guilty. Like, I don't want to repeat yelling patterns from my own childhood. And this is how I reacted to my son. And I'm just so ashamed, so embarrassed. And she paused me and she's like, it doesn't sound like you're doing what you're afraid you're doing, right? She's like, I think there's a difference between you're afraid to come off this way, but you're also telling me like what you're doing to react differently. It sounds like you're taking a deep breath, you're removing yourself from the room. And it like gave me a reminder of like, why the perfectionism, right? I want to be the perfect mom. I don't want to ever make a mistake. I don't want to damage my child. God forbid, like my yelling or my angry moment, hurt his feelings for the rest of the day. And she like was able to help me look at that differently and be like, you're human. People yell, people lose their cool. Tantrums are intense, right? There's like a little child screaming at you, like coming at your nervous system. You want to like defend yourself. So she made me feel a little bit better and kind of highlighted like, you're being hard on yourself. Like you expect to be this perfect mom, but you're not a perfect person.
No, I say that all the time. Oh my gosh. Like it's just, that is one thing with motherhood. And I honestly, and I've said this time and time again, I was like, I don't want to be perfect at motherhood. And that's like the one thing that I try and encourage people at. And I'm like, I know that sounds harsh because some of us just, it sounds like the one job, if we're going to get any job perfect, it should be that. What good would that do anyone if this was the generation right now where we all got it perfect from whatever that means? Like, I don't think anyone could even define what perfection is. Right. But let's say we had one clear definition and we got it all right starting right now. When our kids come to their own time, like what does that teach them? Like, I feel like that teaches them nothing. I think the biggest thing that I notice with parents of today, I think we're so hard on ourselves. But I also think we need to realize like the difference of this generation of parenting is doing, because I think we have an ownership level that past generations did not have before. I think we are really owning up to, we have to work through a lot of shit. Like every generation is going to have to work through a lot of shit. But I think this generation is the first one to really call it and be like, okay, the hard work is starting today.
I agree with you.
It's not going to be perfect. Oh my God. We're going to, hopefully for our kids, it's going to be much better.
Hi. Sorry, I lost you, Mary.
No worries. This is for some reason slowing down a little bit, but that's okay. It looks like it's on our end. Looks like it's load data mode. How do I do that?
You're not frozen anymore, which is good.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. Even on either side of this, it should be okay. The way this whole Riverside works is it fuses our two ends. So if it ever freezes on our end, you can just keep talking. Okay. And it's going to keep collecting from you, and it should be collecting from me. We'll find out at the end when it fuses it together, but it basically takes our two pieces
and meshes it
together.
Awesome.
So that's okay. Okay. So, that's the first step. What's your second step?
Yes. Okay. So step 2 is create some boundaries between work life and home life. And nowadays, these boundaries are so beyond blurred. And technology led to this over the past 50 years with being able to email people from home, right? People have cell phones. Your boss can call you at your home. Back in the day, like you went to work, to your office, and like no one bothered you after you clocked out at 5 o'clock. that doesn't exist anymore. And there's so much wonderful stuff with that. There's so many people that can make their work kind of weave into their life, right? Like, oh, I'll do my work when my kids go to bed, or I'll do the work when the kids are at school, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of benefit, but it also gives so much access to people who are working. There's like no cutoff, right? There's no escape. Like there's no hard line, like, okay, this is my work hour and this is my home hour. And we kind of have to recreate that for ourselves. And of course, this pandemic took it to the next level where so many more people are working from home and having to parent at the same time. And it's just chaos. But if a person can draw a boundary around the number of hours they spend working in the first place, right? What's your comfort level? Like, how much can you really take on? Are you someone that is going to work 40, 50 hours a week? Or are you someone that's working 10, 20 hours a week? No one can answer that for you, but you want to get a clear understanding if you have that luxury, right? Sometimes we don't have the choice of what our hours are. But be able to draw kind of like the sacred line around it and get comfortable saying no, right? You will actually perform better at work and have better relationships with your kids and family members if you can try your best to separate and have boundaries around time spent in each zone. Now, listen, like life happens. Sometimes you're at work and you get a call from the school that you have to go pick up your son, and then you pick up the son, you put him in front of the TV while you can finish the work project. Like you do what you have to, right? Or vice versa. Like you may have a huge deadline coming up and you have to tell your kids, you know what, mommy can't put you to bed tonight. I have to go back and work on this deadline. Daddy's going to do it, or babysitter's going to do it. So it's not always clear and distinct. We do have to be flexible, but we do have to try and protect it with some boundaries. And we use our value system to help us set these boundaries. And that's kind of step 3 I'll get to later. But you really have to understand where you want to put your attention so you can be really present and engaged, right? So heading into values a little bit, this is part 2 of part 2. Our values help us guide our decisions. And what we value now as a mother is going to be very different than what we valued probably when we were single, or when we were married and had no kids and we were working, or what we valued in college. Our values shift and change as we grow. And sometimes we have to do a little intake of what are our current values. Do I value being present, engaged with my kids when they're in front of me? Do I value being there for these big moments? Do I value hard work? Like you have to understand your values, and that's a conversation I get into with some of my clients. And then those values help you make decisions around your boundaries between work and life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. It's like the part of the huge shift, I think, of motherhood is just it all of a sudden springs on something where I think that's why motherhood, the transition into motherhood is such a hard one, because you don't expect that shift to happen where all of a sudden you're like, oh, like certain things don't rank for me anymore. And I know that was for me. So when I had my first, I was a personal trainer. Like that's what I did full time and as like a career. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I tried returning when I was pregnant with her, and it was just hard. And then I got a position when I was like pregnant with my second and had her and whatnot. But I realized, because I was personal training, I would bring her to like this daycare center in the gym. That way it was nice. I had childcare taken care of and things like that. But it wasn't like a daycare. It was just a childcare. It was just like two high schoolers taking care of these kids. And she got sick all the time. My oldest got sick and I was pregnant and things like that. So I had this fresh, brand new job, and I ended up calling out a ton because she would get sick. I couldn't bring her into the childcare, and it didn't have a babysitter. So I ended up quitting because I think it was like, I don't even know what number it was of me calling out. And I know that my manager was pissed. Like I knew he was, I could feel it, blah, blah, blah. And I remember getting off that phone call, and I called my husband. I was like, I'm done. I'm quitting. And he said, what? No, you don't have to do that. I was like, Kev, I value, like, I am a high achiever. I value hard work. I also value my time as a mom, and I want to be there for my children.
Yes.
I can't do both. I cannot do both at 100%. And that doesn't sit right with me. I'm a high achiever in that, like, if I can't do something 100%, I don't want to do it at all. It's kind of an issue sometimes, but I realized that about myself, and thankfully we were in a position where I could draw back and be home. But it was just one of those things where I was like, I can't do it. And I couldn't, I think sometimes that's actually one thing that, like, thankfully I have help now, but I do have a full-time job with the podcast and Instagram and social media and things like that. It is a full-time job for me. But it's definitely one of those things where it's like, I have to figure out how I can give my 100%, even if it's really 80%, but it feels like 100, and still give my 100% to my kids. It's been a balancing act, but.
I love that. Yeah, I can relate to that too. After I had my son, so before my kids, like, I was a workaholic. I could work 80 hours a week if someone left me to my own devices. Like, I've always been that way. I've always really enjoyed what I do. I'm very lucky that I love what I do, right? And so then when I had this baby boy, I loved working, but then you feel a way you never knew you could feel, right? And then I started counting the minutes, like, oh my gosh, how much am I at work versus being home? And I was working for someone else when he was born, and I had a good 4-month maternity leave, and going back was hard. And so my values changed. And at that point I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to take the leap into owning my own private practice. And it really pushed me to step up to the plate. And I was like, you know what am I waiting for? Now's the time. So I slowly started building my practice. I went part-time where I was, and I got to this great point where I was ready to leave working for someone else to do things on my own. And I told myself, like, I'm not going to work Fridays. Like, I'm going to work 4 days a week, and I'm going to give myself Friday, Saturday, Sunday to be with my son. And that's something I've kept still almost 5 years later. Like, I'm not working Fridays. Friday's the day with the kid that I have at home at the time. And for me, that was the balance. Like, oh, I get to take more control over my schedule. I work for myself, so I'm very lucky. I know not every woman can do that. And I get to choose, okay, I'm taking every school break off with them. That's my attention on them. I get to take 2 weeks in the summer. So I've been able to kind of balance the schedule around what I feel, like you're saying, is in alignment with what your 100% could be. And it's like we do, going back to the shoulds and the musts, like, there was a point I was like, a good mom should be with her kid 100% of the time. But that belief really tugged on other parts of myself that I love, which was being a therapist, right? So then I was like, how do I work this out? And I was really judgmental of myself and ridiculously, literally counting the hours I spent at work versus my kid, and beating myself up if I was at work more than the hours spent with my kid. And I was like, you know what? I value quality time over quantity of time, right? So I'm going to change my life. Like, when I am with my kid, the phone's away. I'm going to spend focused quality time with my kid or children now when I'm not at work, because I could have terrible interactions and not pay attention to them and be with them 24/7, or I could have focused, intentional time with them. And for me, that balance has felt good.
Yeah. Well, I like, kind of similar, but I had a conversation about moms, and I think this is like, I think moms today really have gone a little overboard. I think we have gone, like, we're trying to, like, fill some gap, and then we kind of spilled over a little bit, and we're doing certain things. One of those being interacting with our kids, but playing with our kids.
Yeah.
And I talked about it, and I said, I don't like playing with my kids. And I said this on TikTok, and people jumped on me. And I came back and I explained, I was like, you don't understand. I was like, I don't get enjoyment from playing dress up with my kids. I don't get enjoyment from playing the games that are designed for children. There's a reason why there's adult things and there's things designed for kids. Does that mean my kids are going to come over and I'm going to be like, what you're doing is stupid? No, stop that. Like, absolutely not. But I don't also pressure myself to think that I have to play with them all the time. Like, I don't want to. I want them to go play by themselves. Like, first things first, I'm going to be like, go over there and go play by yourself, buddy. Like, go try that. Go play with your siblings. Like, go do that first. And then there's times that I will, and then I will put down stuff and I will focus. And what I've done, and what's actually been 30 minutes, whatever I can do, where I'm like, okay, timer's on, phone's off, TVs are off. We're dedicating quality time right now where you have my one-on-one attention. And I'm telling you, I think, well, one, it's a huge mind shift for me. I think sometimes you just need to, like, reconnect with your kids so you don't lose your ever loving mind on them. And then two, I think they love it. They love that so much, but I don't want them to rely on me for that entertainment. But I think parents have we've now gone to the limit of, like, really going overboard. Because I think the generations of the past people joke, like they would just send us outside and be like, come home when it's dark type of thing, which I personally loved. But I think, it's just now we've kind of backtracked and we're like, oh no, we need to spend every waking second with our children. It is too much. It's too much. And yeah, well, and I shared recently, and this is like, I just was reading comments on Facebook. One reel I shared was of me like in a bathroom, and I just like locked my door and I said, I just don't want to be fucking touched. And it's just like me screaming it. It's an audio voice. It's not even my voice, but it's somewhat me lip dubbing, and it's going viral on Facebook. And people were like, sorry, but you guys need therapy. If you guys are acting like this, you need therapy. And it's talking about like being touched out. And I responded to the commenter and I was like, I said, there's nothing wrong with therapy. So you saying that is kind of like a jab. And I said, therapy is great. Everyone needs therapy. But I said it too. I said, this is an incredibly normal part of motherhood. And it's an incredibly normal part of humanism. If you are spent every waking second being touched by someone else, being asked to do something by someone else, and you have no time to yourself, it is normal to kind of want to explode a little bit. And I explained at the end, I said, therapy is going to teach you how to better regulate that feeling, but it's not going to eliminate it. It's not going to take your kids away from wanting to climb on you. It's just going to teach you how to better like absorb that frustration and like kind of make sure that you don't flip out type of thing.
Yes. So you're like controlling your actions, your emotions are regulated a little bit better. No, I agree with everything you're saying. It's so true. And, I never knew like that was a thing, being touched out. And then after the birth of my second child, I had such bad anxiety, irritability. Like I brought on an autoimmune disorder, like shit hit the fan after my second child. And I tried to return to work in the same capacity I did with my first. I couldn't handle it. Anyway, I was like scrolling one day and I saw somebody, maybe an influencer, talking about being overstimulated and touched out. And that made me feel so seen. I was like, holy shit, I totally agree with this. This is why I'm so irritable. Like I'm breastfeeding 24/7. I have a 3-year-old that I'm potty training and everyone's climbing on me and I just want to be left alone. So hearing this theme of being touched out like gave me an aha moment and made me be a little bit more gentle with myself. And then I could communicate that to my kids in their age appropriate way. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like, and that was like another comment where someone said like, I love comments like that on Facebook are famous for comments, but someone saying like, she said, well, actually, no, I did know this because I took more than 30 seconds to look up parenting before I made the choice to become a parent, like basically saying that we didn't know what we were getting into and we should have researched. And I want you so badly to be like, I have a feeling that your research involved something along the lines of social media, hence the reason why I create the content I do. So that way moms who aren't moms yet are better prepared for when this comes in, because that's the whole goal of it, is like for us to not be so sidelined by so much of this stuff, because it's just, there's so many things that I feel like I just didn't know. I think, we try to like explain this stuff in the most gentle of terms for, up and coming moms. Cause, we want motherhood. I love being a mom. Like I love being a mom. And I think that's why, like when I was saying, like with trying on dresses and want to impress people type of thing, is for me, I want people to see me and be like, motherhood isn't that bad. Because I think sometimes people look at a mom that we have a view as to moms, their bodies go like after they have kids, or they look tired. And we take this all as such a negative thing that now if I feel like I'm reflecting any of that stuff, I feel like I am now telling someone that motherhood is really terrible. And it's not, because I really love it, but those things do exist. So it's just like,
it's finding the middle ground, right? Back to like the all or nothing thinking. It's not either or, it's both and. I love being a mother. And it's really difficult at times, right? I love working and I love being a mother. I love, so we want to really incorporate so much of the middle ground, right? Of like, there's space for imperfection. There's space for growth. There's space for challenge. And I think, unfortunately, with social media, we're held to really high standards, and people's comments, like the one you're sharing, negatively feeds into these high standards of how we need to be as women and as moms. And it's so frustrating, but we need a minute sometimes. So that it's so important. I know. And so that actually leads me to my third and final step for working moms trying to manage stress and anxiety and perfectionism is creating a personalized mental health routine. And I use the term self-care for my course, The Path to Peace, but I don't even know if I love that term because I think people misconstrue what self-care is. I think people think like getting a manicure and drinking wine and wearing a face mask, like that is awesome. Do that when you can. But in my terms of self-care, it's like keeping sacred moments for yourself where you keep where you feel anchored and grounded, and repeating that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to the point it becomes habitualized, and you just have this great flow of your day where you find you can be present with your kids and you can be present with your work or whatever it's doing, and with your husband and with your social life. You can't do everything in the same moment, but you can create habits that set you up for that. So a lot of my conversations with clients or in my course is, how do you identify these sacred moments? There's probably one thing you could do every day. There's probably one thing you can do every week, and one thing you could do every month that makes you reconnect with yourself. It prevents you from burnout. And by the way, like, we can feel burnt out from work, but we can feel burnt out from motherhood. Going back to the paid or non-paid work, like, we can feel extremely burnt out from things we're not getting a paycheck for, right? So we need that time to disconnect so we aren't burnt out. So for like an example of my mental health routine is like, I know I have to be in bed by 9 o'clock. That's just me. I need to be asleep by 9 because I want to get up at 5 so I can have my coffee in peace. I can get ready for work without people hanging on me. I can take my shower and I can do my workout, right? And if I could do that 4 days a week, I'd feel like a success. And if I can get my kids into bed on time, I can watch a show with my husband and decompress. It's a great day, right? So bedtime is huge. A daily early bedtime is huge for me. Coffee and silence is huge for me. On a monthly basis, I want to be able to see some girlfriends, right? We go out to dinner or we meet up without the kids, with or without, but sometimes we prefer without. What can I do weekly? I like to watch a show and spend time with my husband on a Friday, right? So building these routines, they're not fancy. For some people, weekly self-care might be going to therapy or couples therapy every other week, whatever it might be. It's unique and individual to everyone, but we have to focus on prioritizing these small moments. It makes such a difference for how you show up in other areas of your life.
Yeah. I am a huge proponent of that, because I think that was the one thing I think I did with my second baby rocked my world.
Same.
Yeah. Like, just did not expect the bus that was about to come and hit me when I had my second.
Yeah.
It was also during COVID.
Same.
So I think that's also kind of what really rocked the boat. But, I shared about this recently, but I said, I used to I got myself in a rut. Like, I used to always love, I've always loved makeup. I've always loved just clothes, and I've loved that stuff. But when I had my second, I kind of got away from that, where I just didn't feel good in anything, where I stopped. And then I just kind of lost track as to who I was. And I remember hitting rock bottom where I was so burnt out with everything. And it was because I forgot. And you kind of chalk it up, and self-care, I think, kind of gets, a lot of people think self-care is selfish. They think going out and if you want to go out with your girlfriends without your kids, some people really struggle with that, thinking that that's a selfish thing, because as moms, we need to be with our kids 24/7. Good moms need to be with their kids, like you said, 24/7. Mm-hmm. It's not true.
Not true.
It's not true. A good mom is a happy mom that's healthy and happy and can do that. That way she can come back to her kids and
interact well.
I said, yeah, it's not me first. It's me too. Mm-hmm. It's just we need that time for ourselves so we can kind of get back and pour that into everyone else. That's an analogy everyone's here. You can't pour from an empty cup, but you really can't. You need that for you. And I had a guest on season 1 of my podcast. So for anyone listening, Marcella Hill, but she came on and she's a mom in her late 40s. And she was talking how after her kids were grown, she said the thing that was kind of hard was she didn't know who she was anymore. And the thing that she encourages people to do is finding joy outside of motherhood and outside of another person. Like if you can ask yourself right now, what brings me joy, and you cannot name another person in your life, what would your answer be? And it's a huge question. I remember when she said that to me, I was like, oh, like that's actually really great question, because I think in motherhood, especially in like parenthood, we just get swallowed up, especially in the young years, but we get swallowed up where it's like, it really is an identity like crisis a little bit, where we use, I mean, we're called mom all the time. That's what people call us, is mom. Like doctors, you go to the doctor's office, how do you do it, mom? Yes. Like, what's going on, mom? Yes. Like that becomes who we are. So we forget like, no, I'm also Mary. Like hi, who I don't know who I am anymore, because yes. I've been doing this for so long. Yes. So I think that's so important, is that self-care aspect of like knowing, so we can get in touch with like our core.
Totally. And you know what I think too, Mary? I don't think our moms and grandmothers modeled self-care. I think they came from generations where like it was unheard of like to go out to dinner with your friends. Like what? My grandmother was not doing that. My mom wasn't doing that. Now she does, right? But we're grown, and she's always had great girlfriends, but most of her time was spent with us, which was beautiful, right? But we're, I think, as we're saying, we're one of the first generations to call like patterns out that aren't helpful to mothers and try and correct them. And self-care is so necessary for us to be the moms we want to be, right? We, as parents, we're the templates, we're the blueprints of emotion regulation, of how to communicate, how to set boundaries, right? And we can model stuff to our kids that's helpful and unhelpful. And we want to be able to show them, like, it's important for me to take a break because then I rejuvenate and can be my best self. And child, you need to learn how to take a break too. Or teenager, you need to learn how to spend a Friday night by yourself without doing this, that, and the other, so you can show up as your best self. And also, like, the relationship, I can, as a couples therapist, I can tell you how many people come into my office as a couple, and we trace back, like, when did things change in the relationship? And it's when they became parents. And when they became parents, they became two people co-parenting under the same roof that they just lived and breathed for just getting the household to run. They never focused on nurturing the relationship. And I can't tell you how many people stay together because they think it's the right thing for their kids. And the minute they go to college, they end up divorcing. And then the kids are like, these young adults are like, my whole life feels like a lie. Like, why put the burden on me to stay together for me? This is your shit to deal with. So taking time for yourself should also include taking time for your relationship and to nurture that and model what a good relationship looks like.
Yeah. Well, I actually just literally had that conversation with my husband the other day, because it's just like, you get that roommate stage, you enter that roommate stage. It's very easy to do. And I think it's something that a lot of people get really afraid to talk about. And that's just one thing that I don't sugarcoat, and I'll fully talk about it. But especially, like, we have little kids, we have five, 3 and 1. Like, we are in the thick years of this whole parenting thing where it's just, we're tired and we're hustling and we're just doing so much. And I even said to my husband, I was like, we're great. And we are like, we laugh together, we do stuff, but I'm like, there's something missing. I said, there's something going on. And I'm like, I'm one of those that just cuts right to it. And I'm like, we're not the same. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, we need to come together. I was like, it's time. I said, it's time for us to like schedule date nights and schedule sex and schedule like things that we know. And I said, I know that's not as romantic, but I'm like, we need to, because we need to like know that we're a priority, because I know it's hard and you forget. And I feel like the more and more you forget and the more you get pushed, you get like, there's like a limit. I feel like a limit where you can get pushed to those sides. And the moment you kind of keep letting it go, you get further and further. And then it gets really awkward to try and find your way back together. And that's when you're kind of like, oh shit, like we're just going to keep it over here at this point. But I know I said to my husband, I was like, we're not letting it get that far. Like we're going to come back together now.
I think you're absolutely right. And like going back, you even brought up scheduling sex in addition to date nights, 100%, right? That is actually a technique a lot of sex therapists use, and we use in couples therapy, because otherwise you're not going to make time for it. You have 1,000 things to do. You have kids, you have jobs, you have this and that. Unless you're both scheduling and having like a conversation or text exchange, like, hey, is it happening Friday night or Saturday night? What's on the calendar? When do we have time to dedicate to sex? It probably won't happen. And actually, we call it turning the faucet on. The more you start engaging sexually, the more your libido gets revved up, you turn the faucet back on, you're like, oh, I want to have sex again next week. Oh, I want to have sex on a Tuesday. You know, let me treat myself to sex on a Tuesday, right? So the more you talk about it, the more engaged you become with each other romantically, emotionally, and everything, without just being parents with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes a huge difference. I have a guest co-host that comes on twice a month and we talk about sex and everything, but you notice, I always notice if we're in a dry spell, I know, I can tell our relationship may not be at first, but eventually you know that we're in a dry spell because of the way we interact with one another. It's like, it becomes almost like an awkward, uncomfortable exchange because we become, it's like they call it the roommate stage for a reason. You become roommates. It's just, there's that added level that's missing. And it's an awkward piece to kind of get back. Sex sometimes is an awkward thing to kind of get back. And I feel like the more you get into a rhythm of it, then it's just easy to maintain. But life happens.
I agree. It kind of goes back to this mental health routine that I'm talking about. Maybe for someone listening, part of their mental health routine, their self-care routine is weekly sex with their partner, or bi-weekly or monthly. Who am I to say how often you want to have sex? But maybe that's part of your mental health routine that makes you feel connected to your partner.
Go have sex, people. Go get it on. Report back. Go get it on, and then come back to my sex confessions and report back as to how that went for you. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think this is also helpful. I'm sure everyone listening, whether you're a quote unquote a working mom, again, remember what that means for us here, or not. I think it's important. It's important. I think, you can take it from a home aspect of, identifying your values and setting boundaries. That way you're not folding laundry and doing all this stuff, setting boundaries with your spouse in terms of what you're doing at home. That's a big thing that you can incorporate there. I think that's a really big thing that you can incorporate there, because it's a huge thing I'm hearing a lot of these days is the roles of people not helping out because you're a stay-at-home mom, and that drives me nuts. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And even for the working moms too, I'll hear okay, I worked 40 hours and I'm home, and now I have to fold this fucking laundry. That's going to take me forever. And that's, again, taking time away from the children. I was just gone all week and now I want to focus on them and I have these chores to do. So delegating to other people is huge. Can your husband help with a chore? Maybe are you in a place where financially you can get some help with cleaning or whatever it might be, so you feel good about the intentional time you're spending with your kids or your spouse or whatnot.
Well, awesome. I love every single thing about this. I think this is awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Always.
I think
we'll probably have to have you on again. We'll have you on again. I'll schedule something that we can have you on and we can talk more anxiety, because I think that's a big one, is just the anxiety piece of motherhood, because I dealt with postpartum anxiety and it's a real bitch.
It's real brutal. It's so relatable, and so I'm more than happy to come on.
Well, thank you so much. If you guys are listening, if you're looking for more information on Justine, or I don't know if you offer services, but if you guys are in New York City or New York State, then you can always look her up there, and I'll put all the information in the show notes and everything. That way you can find her and reach out to her. But she's worth talking to, worth listening to with her podcast, and she's great. Always. Another episode down and way more to go. But thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to help support this podcast, I would love for you to subscribe. I'd love for you to share it with others and post about it on your own social media, or leave a rating and review. I cannot tell you how helpful and how appreciated those things are for me. Of course, to catch all the latest from me, you can follow me over on Instagram at The Very Merry Life, over on TikTok, The Very Merry Life. And even if you wanted to check out my monthly newsletter, you can do so by subscribing over at theverymerrylife.com. I'll see you next week. Stay tuned for more honest, raw, real chit chat. I have some amazing moms lined up coming on, and shit's going to get fun. So buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be good.